It might seem a little insane, but taking a car to the moon on the last 3 Apollo missions was actually a really worthwhile endeavor for NASA. I'm Amy Shearer Title, and this episode of Vintage Space is all about the Apollo lunar roving vehicle. It wasn't until early 1970, after the first 2 successful lunar landing missions were done, that NASA contracted Boeing to build the Apollo lunar rover. The purpose was to give Apollo astronauts a way to cover more ground during their brief stays on the moon. But to function in the lunar environment, it had to be a lightweight vehicle that was still sturdy enough to carry 2 men, their tools, and all of the samples they would gather, across a wide variety of terrains and through a large range of temperatures. The final vehicle resembled an open car design with wire mesh wheels. But to really be useful, engineers had to figure out a way to get it from a stored position in the lunar module onto the lunar surface, and it had to be something astronauts could do wearing their bulky pressure gloves. The solution was to fold the rover against the side of the lunar module's descent stage in Quadrant 1, one of 4 available storage bays. It was stored with the bottom of its central chassis or frame facing out and its forward and rear chassis sections folded onto that center section. The wire wheels were folded into those sections. Deployment began with one of the astronauts pulling a cable attached to the rover's aft chassis before handing it off to his moonwalking companion, who would hold it for tension. Next, the astronaut would climb up the lunar module's ladder to pull a D-ring, releasing the rover's upper restraint and allowing it to fall about 5 inches away from the spacecraft. Pulling a mylar tape on the other side of the rover continued its deployment. As it lowered to the surface, 2 support cables released that in turn triggered a push-off tube that moved the rover's center of gravity outward away from the lunar module. Release pins on the chassis also pulled out, letting the base of the vehicle unfold. The wheels sprung into their deployed positions thanks to torsion bars. Finally, telescoping tubes made sure the rover moved away from the spacecraft as the wheels hit the dust. Once the rover was on the surface, the astronauts just had to set up their seats, put in their footholds and the center control panel, and they were ready to rove. The lunar rovers achieved their main goal of extending surface operations. The first 3 Apollo landing missions, Apollos 11, 12, and 14, covered a total distance of about 4.4 miles. Apollo 15, the first mission to fly with a lunar rover, more than tripled that record, covering a total of 17 miles. Apollo 16 covered 16.8 miles. But it was Apollo 17 that set the distance record, covering 22.2 miles on the lunar surface. And all 3 missions to fly with a lunar rover sent back footage that makes all of us Earthbound drivers intensely jealous. Leave your questions and comments below, and for weekly Vintage Space updates, don't forget to subscribe.